Hi, Renok. Yeah, hi, thank you. How's it with you?
I'm doing great. No, thanks for. I'm glad to hear that you were interested coming on my show. It's great to hear about you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So, before we start, how come you decided to tell your story on my show?
I looked at your previous shows and some of them seem relevant. You seem like the kind of guy that could profit from the story.
Well, thank you. You nervous about telling your story? You said that you came from a terror like a Jewish terrorist. Could you explain about that?
Yeah. Um, it was a background where there was um, no exposure to the outside world altogether. One could say, you see, my family, around 90% of the population, I would say, came from the Holocaust, even though many of them had fled it as children. So they may not have been in the camps per se. The trauma of that period was transmitted to them. And so they lived a totally isolated way of life, totally away from non-Jews, non-religious Jews, anyone that did not live their sort of way of life. They spoke just Yiddish. They just had their type of books. There's no exposure we had no radio, no television, no libraries. So for instance, even though I lived in London, I didn't per se know I lived in London, nor did I know who Margaret Thatcher was the first time I heard her name. I think it may have been in high school, and I thought it was a sort of career. So it was extremely closed off.
Are you still in that group of people, or did you leave that?
I left. It was a gradual process. Even by age 21, I married someone who lived in America. That was around the first time I went on a train by myself. But even when leaving London, my impression was that the entire world was just filled with people like the sort of people in my group, or people that were non-Jewish, because the way I was brought up was that there was either this or that. That's exactly what I was told, exactly what the teachers in the school, the leaders of the group, my family, everyone, just made up of that sort of people. It was binary, either this or that, nothing in between.
When did you get into learning about like AI and like that kind of? You told me you learned about AI and people's like minds and all that.
It's a gradual process. It was along the way. There's a gradual process of finding the outside world. And then around 8 years ago or so, I divorced in America because the family where I came from and the group, they believed that people who left their path, they thought that the souls of their kids would then go to hell or something like that. So they would resort to violence. So they tried to kidnap. I have 3 children. They tried to kidnap my 2 sons. The police, we were living in Chicago at the time. The police got involved, and then after I divorced, they had advised, just change your name, just leave, just play it quiet and just leave. I didn't know much about America. I was still rather ignorant of everything. We had no geography lessons in school, for instance. And so, as said, I changed my name. And I had read some literature book. I think it was from Henry James or so. It was called The Virginians. And my impression was that, Virginia seems a nice, quiet, cultured sort of place where no one will know me or anything like that. And I wanted no more community. I wanted to start my life anew. I went there. It was not the place we lived in was totally, it was deep south. I had heard from 3 people over there. One was a social worker, that there were still slaves that existed there. There were no roads, there were still wells. It was an extremely underdeveloped place. Lots and lots of different groups. So, for instance, my neighbor was KKK. He called me his sister. He didn't know I was Jewish. On the other side, we had a pastor who used to beat the walls and blow horns. He said it was to drive out bad spirits from people. We had a Jehovah Witness. There was the Baptist church. There was the evangelicals. There were Armenians. There was everything and anything. And so people didn't know I was Jewish there. There seemed quite a bit of anti-Semitism. And so that's how I lived on the quiet. And there I started my business. And I got my PhD in behavioral neuroscience. That was just along the way. The whole thing was 6 years. And as a single mother with just my daughter, when I had enough money, we picked up and left.
So pretty much just going from your life at growing up Jewish and all that to kind of experiencing the actual world kind of made you interested in the mines, if I'm getting that right?
Experiencing of the outside world was a gradual process. My first exposure to that was actually in Israel after I married. So my ex-husband, he was of that past group. And the life was so rigid in that past group that basically the husband had very little to do with the wife. So much of the time, I had very little to do with him. And I was extremely bored. Now, I was not only bored, but I was curious about this outside world. Plus, it turned out rather different to what I was told. So even though I had been told that there was just these sort of people that I grew up with and all the rest non-Jews, I saw there were a whole lot of totally different kinds of people. Well, one day I wanted to see a museum, a train museum, and on my way there, in that building, there was this office door, and on the door it said something about that they were involved with investigating kidnapped Yemenite children, and I was extremely curious about this. So I knocked, I inquired about the guy. His name is David Bedin. I'm still in touch with him to this day, about what all this was about. And then he told me he's a media agency. And then I asked whether I could volunteer. I didn't know anything about Israel, not about the politics, not about the people, knew nothing whatsoever. I knew nothing about the Palestinians then either. There was Arafat at that time. I knew nothing about that. And he had me sign this paper that if anything happened to me, he was not responsible. And I didn't understand what would happen to me. And I was sure, I was just wanting to meet all sorts of people to know things. So that was my first exposure to the outside world. He trained me to be a journalist. I shook the hand of Arafat's foreign minister. In turn, I visited, interviewed people on extreme left kibbutzim, people actually then also who were in Gaza, close to Gaza. I interviewed people on the extreme right. I was in the Knesset too. all across the tangent. And that was my first exposure to the outside world.
Wow.
And I could see there was such a nuance. What that exposed me to was also that there wasn't this binary, this or that. There's such a spectrum of different opinions. Each person thought they were right, but you just can't say that this is right or that is right. There's an entire spectrum of different opinions, and many of them come from the way how a person was brought up.
How do you think your view on the outside world has grew over time?
How the outside world grew, or how I got impacted by it.
Yes, like how did you from when you actually got exposed to it over time? How do you think your view today was different from when you first experienced it?
It's just been a constant expansion. As when I grew up, I often felt as though I was in a cell. Much later, I read a poem about a tiger behind bars, just pacing back and forth, longing to break through the bars. That was how I felt growing up. And because I felt that way, I've still got this endless curiosity of meeting loads and loads of different people, anyone. I don't judge people by their birth, their race, their color, anything like that. All of that seems absurd to me. I'm just interested in people as they are. And to me, it's their insides that count. So it's been a constant and ongoing expansion, this outside world, a lot of it through errors. So for instance, well, after Israel, we lived in America. And I was looking for a job, so I was offered a job in Budapest. As said, I was not taught anything about this outside world in the school I grew up in. The only lessons I had in this school was how to be a good wife and a good mother. So I thought, Budapest, okay, I'm looking for a job. I thought Budapest is another place in America, just as Liverpool or just like some other places over there. And so that's how I found myself in Hungary. And again, Hungary, well, I met gypsies. I met Jews who honestly did not know they were Jews. Some of them had joined the neo-Nazi movement. See, because their parents had been in the Holocaust and then wanted to save their children the trouble of knowing that they were Jews, so brought them up totally with their ignorance. There was a stint where I lectured in the Budapest Central European, East European University on comparative religions. And so I just said, hey, I can do, hey, I want to know these people, I want to know that, want to know the other. Got myself in some crazy situations, but my knowledge of this outside world expanded again. So that's how it's been all the time. Simply being open to experiences and wanting to know different others and how and why they think the way they do.
Talking a little bit about like AI and the mind and all that. How do you think neuroplasty can affect can affect the mind, such as like anger and aggression and all that?
Okay, the mind is like a bag, and what it's packed with is how I see the outside world. So for instance, everything that I was taught of how to see the world, how to see you as a person, say, how to see what my goals, how I should live this life, what is the right thing to do and what is not the right thing to do, why I'm born, why I'm going to die, what I need to do to be a good person, and so forth. All of that was according to how according to what my parents, my teachers, the children around me, my schoolmates, everyone around me, according to how according to what they packed into my mind. So when I first got out of that community at age 21, say, I would think of people with a beard and with a hat and with side curls, say, as holy people. Anyone like that would appear to me as a holy person. Anyone, say, whose head was shaved, who had earrings in the ears, say, or anything like that, was to me not a good person. At that age, at age 21, also, my view of the world was that my only reason for existence was to have loads of children. We were told to have around 6 million children because that was how many people were destroyed. So to have loads of children and to make the husband happy. If I then would have seen the I of now, I would have disliked myself. I would have believed I would go to hell. In time, as my mind picked up different things from the world, my mind expanded and began to see things differently. Now, many people don't have the chance for their mind to expand. They still keep with what they were taught. And they don't see the world as it is. And so then many of them, say, feel upset, or they go in the wrong direction, or they may waste their lives without knowing it, or they may hurt themselves without knowing it. So to go back to your original thing about neuroplasticity, and to explain how I got from where I was to how I am where I am now, I deal with a lot of people from loads and loads of different religions, and lots of cults. So for instance, right now there was someone from Baha'i and a Freemason who contacted me. Some of these people used to be Muslim, used to be Christian, Mormon, and so forth. And many of them say they cannot get past their trauma, or they don't know how to deal with men. They feel awkward when it comes to dealing with men, or they still really hate, say, a Hindu, or say. So, in other words, the trauma of their past is still with them. They really want to live a successful life, but they find that they are held back. So basically, what I tell them is that that's normal. What's holding them back is all the lessons of their past that made their brain the way it is. And that's how they see the world, and that's how they feel. That's normal. But if they want to move forward, they have to see the outside world as it really is. They have to see that sometimes a man with a beard, he may not be a good person, even though their brain tells them he's good. Sometimes the man with the tattoo and the earring, he may be a very good person, even though their brain tells them he's not a good person, and so forth. And the only way that they can really be successful and see the world as it is by seeing everything outside as it is. Meaning, when they see a man with a beard, they see just the man. This is the way he looks. He's got a beard. He's got a hat. This is how he looks in reality. Just that. Just for them to see the reality as it is. And that helps you move forward. Am I clear? Has that been clear? Because it's been hard to explain.
No, I understand that completely.
Great,
Yeah.
Ronak. For people, I often find this hard to describe, hard to explain, because it's really so abstract and conceptual.
Do you think it's there's a potential risk, like, for using AI for your, like, psychological assessments? You know, like, do you think AI is gonna hurt us in the long run?
When I first heard about ChatGPT coming out and all the hype about it, I was afraid until I started using it. And today, ChatGPT, Gemini, and so forth are like my best buddies. I don't believe that. I think that the media likes to make much more of it. They like to create fear because that's how the media sells. A lot of times it makes errors. It can replace certain jobs, but those are basically the very, very basic jobs and where a person doesn't know much. And by that I mean, say, I am a writer. Now, if I were just a beginning writer, and if my grammar and my spelling were not good, and if I knew very little about my subject, but extremely little, then ChatGPT or the AI could easily replace me. But the better the writer I become, and the more I know about my subject, the least likely it is that this ChatGPT will replace me because it often makes errors. It doesn't have the nuances of a human. It's not flexible, and it's still, things change all the time. So while if I know my subject very well, will know the changes, the AI is still stuck in the past somewhat. So in other words, I find it can be very helpful if I know how to use it. And no, as with many of the experts that I know across fields, never have I come across AI displacing someone. I also think that the hype is beginning to dwindle. When this ChatGPT first came out, it was extremely hyped. There was a great marketing plan behind it. So people then did start losing their jobs. But I think by now, people have begun to discover that they're not, if they know their work well, no ChatGPT, no AI will displace them.
Yeah.
No AI, for instance, could ever displace you, Ronak, because you are unique.
Thank you.
No one can mistake you for a robot. And no robot can ever take your place.
Thank
Because
you.
you've got the human touch. And that's the difference. The human touch is the level. But the more skilled and unique you are at your job, robots, no amount of robots can displace you. And the rest is just fear mongering that helps the media sell. A lot of fear mongering. That's how they make the money.
I forgot to ask this question right before the AI one, but how do you help out people, like, with their minds, like, if I'm correct, right?
Mm-hmm. Through their trauma,
Yeah.
through anything that they want, through their indoctrination or bad habits that are holding them back.
How do you find the people that like, do they come to you, or like, what's the process?
Usually over Reddit, I find them now. This wasn't anything that I deliberately set out to find these people. My question from way, way, way back, in growing up in that isolated environment, was how I can know I'm right. So I would wonder, say, these people were brought up to do and to believe certain things. And that's how they spend their whole lives praying this way, doing these things to become successful, buying those certain things, eating this different way, marrying those people, doing this sort of work, and so forth. And then I started wondering, well, I'm also brought up a certain way in my own group, with different beliefs and different behaviors. How can I know I am right? And so throughout my life, that then became my driving factor, how to know what is right, what is wrong, how to know what is true, what is not true, how to, and that then Well, I taught myself about the brain even before I went to university to learn about the brain. I read everything, say, on the philosophy of truth, philosophy of science, philosophy of how person thinks. Along the way, I experimented on different people. Well, I got some qualifications in counseling, and then I tested some ideas on prisoners in the San Francisco jail, on whether they could get past their bad habits to live the new life that they wanted to live. And so I just tested many different things until I more or less came to that brain idea that I had just mentioned to you before. I'm a research scientist, so to make sure that this really, really works, for quite a while, I helped people across these Reddit religions, people who had left different religions and people who had left different cults. I answered their problems using this, and they said to me, hey, this helps me. Hey, that's wonderful. I never heard of that. And then there was a person who couldn't control her emotions. She said anytime she would get sad when she saw someone who looked a certain way, she'd get angry, say anything like that. So then I said to her, well, how about if you do this, that, or the other? This was my way of testing whether my idea helped across religions, across different types of problems, thoroughly testing it. And in time, I had people through Reddit coming to me, approaching me and saying, hey, I've got this problem, that problem, what, and so forth. And that's how this happened.
Do you, so it's mainly online that you help people out?
This actually isn't my job. This has just turned out to be a hobby, although I have written a draft of my memoir and this idea and so forth. I'm in the middle of polishing it. I have sent it around to one person from each of these ex-religious groups, asking them, does this make sense? Is it clear to you? And so forth. And by the end of this month, I'm gonna give it the final polish and then send it off. But actually, I work in emerging tech. I'm a writer, a research scientist. Some of my clients were Google, Yale Law School, Amazon, Microsoft, and so forth. And yeah, I work on AI. I write, research, and work as a market consultant on AI and cybersecurity. It all connects. Actually, the best writing comes when I'm trying to help the other. That's the most difficult sort of writing.
Hey guys. Thanks for being at the end of the episode. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. This is all that was recorded. For some reason, recording cut off in the middle, so the rest of it sadly did not make it. But thank you very much for making it. The next episode, as you always know, it'll be up in 2 weeks on this day. And subscribe and flush that like button. I really would love to see you there. Enjoy your Wednesday.